Alrighty, today we have another list of lords, legendary lords, ranked by lore power. And today we're going to do the Mortal Chaos Champions, is what I'll call them. Just basically anybody that doesn't have demonic instability crumbling. There are 8 of them for this list today, and we will start at number 8. The least powerful, I think, is Festus, the Leech Lord. Festus was just like a human doctor who was trying to cure some diseases and got corrupted by Nurgle when Nurgle was like, I can show you lots of good diseases and cures and stuff, and then Festus went crazy. But he mostly just wanders around the battlefields looking for various tinkers and tonics to play with, ingredients to throw in his soups and experiment on for discovering new plagues and whatnot. He's not that strong of a fighter. He's not even that strong of a spellcaster, truly. He does a lot more like rituals that need time and setting up and whatnot. Now, he's a legendary lord. He's a scary combatant to like an empire swordsman. Like a single swordsman, yeah, they're gonna have a bad time. But in the end times is the only time I really saw him fight. Now maybe I'll find a different book where he does some fighting, but he had to fight Lewin, and Lewin had already lost Biaki. And Lewin had also just beaten Kugath Plaguefather, so he was very injured and extremely tired, and Festus ran up to him, and Lewin disemboweled him 2 or 3 times, and every time Festus would just drag his intestines around and keep swinging at Lewin with this like rusty cleaver, and eventually just dragged Lewin down under his own weight to get one shot by Vlad from behind. But yeah, I mean, if Lewin was, you know, full power and not exhausted as hell after beating Kugath fucking Plaguefather and still at his mount, then Festus wouldn't have stood a chance. So he's not a very good combatant. He's not very strong. He's much more supportive, much more of a scientist. Just leads hordes to places and then fucks off and does his own science things, like summoning Kugath, which he did. He summoned him. Took a long time, multiple months of work under Altdorf. So yeah, as far as like combatants go, pretty weak. It's not really his thing. Next up at number 7, we have Village the Curseling. He's a little better at combat than Festus. The Twisted Twins, the brothers, the brains on the back being Village, and he's now piloting his stronger Chaos Champion brother here, who dual wields weapons, doesn't feel much pain as his magical half drives him on. These guys are strong because they're a hybrid unit. I mean, Village on the back can cast spells while his brother tanks shots, kills randoms in front of him, you know, actually brings martial skill and strength. So with the brains and the brawn, they're a pretty dangerous duo. Could slap through an awful lot of mortal units as Village, stop cranking his head around, Jesus. It's kind of messed up. Yeah, he's really good. The reason I kind of stall out here is I think the only negative I'd say about him is he would have a hard time beating the other mortal champions that are coming up. So he just kind of falls here from that. I have no real complaints about Village. He just doesn't stack up well against other very strong melee combatants. Now, some people might argue that Sigvald deserves number 7 on this list and should be behind Village, but I think Sigvald gets a hard rap. He is insanely fast. With his sword, I think it's Sliver Slash or Silver Slash or Civil, it's something kind of dumb like that, but I'm going to go with Sliver Slash. He's insanely fast with that thing, like a blur. Even elves have a hard time keeping up with him in melee combat, and elves are the fastest things alive. So he's insanely quick. I don't think Village's strength would really matter too much against Sigvald. I feel like Sigvald wouldn't get hit. Or if he does, he still has the Mirror Shield, which is quite powerful as well. Just an insanely strong shield. It has some yada yadas about it, but essentially it's a shield that can never be scratched or whatever. He has inhuman speed. His sword is crazy fast. His sword has amazing armor piercing, and he's empowered by Slaanesh for further speed. So the problem with him fighting Village, when I put him ahead of Village, is just Village's strength wouldn't really matter. And I feel like his spellcasting wouldn't be enough to take down Sigvald either. Because if these two meet up and they just stare at each other and they decide to fight, Sigvald's Mirror Shield can take blue fires pretty easily, deflects magic quite well, and then once he gets into melee, I just think Village is doomed. He's too fast, he's too strong. No, he's only at number 6 on this list because Sigvald is limited by being mortal, and he also has some strong vices about just like staring at himself in the mirror. Sometimes mid-fight he'll get distracted to look at how pretty he is, and if he ever gets scratched, he goes into a bit of a blind rage. And that can be helpful versus certain opponents, but versus the level of strength you're dealing with legendary lords, those kind of mistakes will get you killed. So, Sigvald, you made it to 6. Good for you. But I think everybody else here is a little bit stronger. All right, Valkia the Bloody makes it into number 5. for the Mortal Chaos champions. She is the Valkyrie of Khorne, Khorne's leading lady. Just a chaotic warrior that instead of dying became a demon and came back, but it's still kind of mortal, kind of demon. I don't really understand, honestly. But from what I've seen of her combat, she's amazing. Her demon shield is very good. It shrieks at, like, it's not just a true sound volume, but, like, you know, that kind of mortal soul quaking volume. So she's pretty good at stun locking opponents with a screaming shield that holds them in place while her spear stabs them. Also, having solo flight is no small matter. Like, every charge she takes against you will have that much more impetus behind it as her speed and mass come flying down at you from above. She can pick her engagements, and then with the shrieking shield, it's really hard to keep your focus so you can move your shield or move your sword in the direction to block her incoming spear. So her speed, her strength, her ability to fly, and her magical screaming shield do put her above Sigvald, though I think it's pretty close between her and Sigvald. She has a couple more qualities as a general than as an individual fighter, and Sigvald is very fast, but I think the fact that Sigvald is a ground-based melee combatant would limit him a lot. It just gives Valkia a whole different Y-axis, you know, because Sigvald can go left, right, up, and down. Backwards and forwards. She can go up and down as well, and any extra mobility in a fight will help quite a lot. I don't actually think her Demon Shield would be specifically good against Sigvald, because Sigvald, blessed by Slaanesh, probably has some sort of magic resistance. But you never know. It might, like, as if she's diving down, it might say, like, you know, Slaanesh says you're so handsome, show me your face. And then Sigvald lowers his shields to show the demon how beautiful he is, and then Valkia just stabs him straight through the head. Like, I could see something like that being his downfall. So I'd give Valkia the edge over Sigvald. It's not a big gap between the two. She's just a good fighter. Next we get to Tamarkan, the Maggot Lord. We do count mounts in this lore strength video, but I honestly think with or without Bibidos, I think he would land in the same spot. And here's the thing, I don't think Bulbulos gets him up to number 2, and I don't think without him he falls to number 4. Wait, no, sorry, he is number 4. I think without his Toad Dragon, he doesn't fall below Valkia. And I think he doesn't give above our next person. I think the gap is too big for a Toad Dragon to make a difference. Now, that is a crazy thing, because the Toad Dragon is an insane melee combatant, and it's huge, and it's very scary. But I think number 3, 2, and 1 are all just above Tamarkan's abilities. But, yeah. So, his Toad Dragon's very scary. And Bibidos, is much bigger than most Toad Dragons are in the lore. So even then, he's more imposing. And just a crazy vomit spewing dragon. That's awesome. And Tamarkan himself is no slouch. So Tamarkan isn't actually, I'm sure a lot of you know this, but he isn't actually the ogre. Tamarkan is the maggot living inside the ogre. You can kind of see his maw there. That's not the ogre's mouth. That's his mouth. Tamarkan's. Right? Kind of goes down his chest. So the reason he made it this high on the list is I feel like Valkia and Sigvald are both better fighters than him, technically. Skill-wise, they would get a lot of cuts in, but the problem is if you read any fights Tamarkan ever gets in, he's a maggot just piloting that body, so he doesn't really feel the pain. So as they keep slashing and slicing at him and tiring themselves out, he just tanks the blows and laughs at them and keeps swinging at them. So one, if Valkia or Sigvald ever made a mistake, they take one hit from that great axe of his, they're doomed, because they're both fighters that can't really take a hit from something like that. They more need to dodge it constantly. So he can afford to make a lot of mistakes, and they can't. Then, considering his strength with his Toad Dragon, Valkia would probably fly above the Toad Dragon and get decent shots on him. I don't think Bibidos would do much to really help in that fight. Sigvald, he wouldn't be able to reach up. So if this guy gets ahead of Sigvald, definitely because of his mount. But even with it, Valkia can just ignore it. But the main problem is if you ever get him low, he will just try and grab you with the ogre's body, and then the arms will hold you in place while the maggot burrows into your flesh and takes over your body as his next host. So I just think that's a lot of hurdles for Valkia to clear. If she can get past his dragon, which she probably can because she's flying, if the dragon never factors into the fight, if she dodges every single swing from Tamarkan's Black Cleaver axe, and if she avoids him grabbing her, then the maggot coming out and burrowing into her skin, then yeah, she can win. But that's an awful lot of ifs, and I do think Tamarkan's just a bit more powerful, a bit stronger. It took Elspeth and Theodor Bruckner teaming up to take him down, and even then it was a close scrap. I think Valkia just gets bodied off screen in the end times. Timmy Tams takes number 4. That leaves 3 above him. Number 3 on this list is going to be Arbol the Undefeated. Considering a Toad Dragon mount, I think it was close between him and Tamarkan, but I went with Arbol just because of Arbol's insane amount of skill. He is called the Undefeated for a reason. He ends up serving Archaon just because, you know, Khorne kind of told him to, and it was not clear who would win in a fight between him and Archaon, but he's very, very strong, has his Fleshhound mount, and his skill is unmatched with a blade. He's Khorne's champion, and Khorne will literally kill him if he ever loses, and yet he has lived for such a long time, and he lives into the end times, never losing a fight while constantly seeking one out. That's a hell of a trophy, because, like, Tamarkan can lose fights all the time, and he just steals the next person's body with his, like, death grasp thing. But Arbol just never loses. And I imagine the fight between him and Tamarkan would be his Fleshhound leaping up onto the Toad Dragon and climbing it with its claws. And then once he gets up to the top, I think Tamarkan's just toast. I think his skill with the blade is so unmatched by Tamarkan that those big clumsy swings would never hit him. And then I think he's skillful enough and his reflexes are fast enough to just see the maggot incoming. And I also think his all-encapsulating Khornate armor would keep him safe, where Valkia is a bit more lightly armored and has exposed skin for the maggot to latch onto. Arbol would I'd probably see the final blows being like an axe going through Tamarkan's neck, and then those big hands reaching for him and barely grabbing Arbol. Let's say they even grab him, and then the maggot comes out. Arbol probably like twists intensely, breaking out of the grasp and then snatching the maggot out of the air and just ripping it apart with his bare hands. That's probably how I see that going. He's just too good. He's too martially skilled to ever fall for something that simple, and I think Tamarkan would just get bodied instantly. Now, getting past the Toad Dragon would be difficult. I think if his Fleshhound can't manage to get on top of it, then sure, the Toad Dragon alone is just too much of a task for him and his mount to get through. Like, that axe is powerful, but it would take a lot of chops to get through that Toad Dragon. I don't think he has it, but again, I think the Fleshhound will easily just climb up that thing. There are only 2 Mortal Chaos Lords left. And, yeah, which one do you think is number 2 and number 1? Well, this might be controversial, but I think number 2 is actually Archaon the Everchosen. So, Archaon may be the Everchosen. He may bring the end of the world around, though partially I think that's the idiocy of the end times writing. But Arbol took on one of the incarnates. He took on Caradrian, the incarnate of fire, and barely lost to an incarnate, and he did eventually die that way. Archaon takes on Karl Franz, the incarnate of heavens, and then also Sigmar reincarnated. And then he takes on also, I believe, Ulrich's champion, so like kind of the dying embers of a god. And he gets beaten by both them, thrown into the abyss. So he's not impossible to beat. Some of the incarnates do it, which is why I have number 1 above him. And if you've been paying attention, you know who number 1 is. But Archaon himself, very, very scary. He has the Eye of Ashirian in his helmet. That's his 3rd eye. It shows him the future, but just like a little bit of the future, and the future is vague. But the closer it gets to the present, the more crisp it is. So when he's in a duel with someone, he can usually see what your next swing is going to be as it's coming and easily deflect it with either his shield or his sword. His sword, the Slayer of Kings, the only reason he beat Grimgor Ironhide, who was the strongest greenskin to ever live, a literal force of nature in one of the incarnates. He beats Grimgor buffed up with the incarnate of beasts, because the Slayer of Kings breaks Gitsnik, and then when Grimgor has no weapon, he stabs him through the chest. So the Slayer of Kings is a very good sword. It's such a good sword that it beats other magical legendary items and shatters them. His great shield is just a great shield. I think it's fine. And then his mount, we are considering mounts if they're named and like usually with the character. Dorger is not really a horse. It just takes the shape of a horse, but it is this unfathomable horror that keeps changing shape as Archaon needs it to. And it itself is a good combatant, so honestly, when you're fighting Archaon, you're kind of fighting a 2v1, because war horses will nip and bite and like kick and charge and whatever, but Dorger takes that to a whole other level. Like, it is a ravenous monstrosity that is constantly jawing at you with serrated teeth and trying to like eat you alive. It's pretty crazy while you're all trying to deflect blows from the Slayer of Kings. So Archaon's spooky, he's scary. He's a spellcaster, warrior guy, has gone through all the chaos trials, has the backing of all the chaos gods behind him. Everybody fears him. He's very, very spooky, but he's not number 1 on this list. Number 1 on the list is Kholek Suneater. Now, I know he's not that impressive in current Total War Warhammer meta, But in lore, he is crazy. He's one of the first Dragon Ogre Shaggoths. He was the oldest son to the original Dragon Ogre Shaggoth. And then when the pact between the Dark Gods and the Dragon Ogres was made, that gave them immortality, he was there. So he's crazy, crazy old. And all Dragon Ogres are linked to lightning and the storm. That's where they get their power. But Kolek takes it to a whole new level. He sleeps across mountaintops. He is way bigger than this game shows him to be. He sleeps across mountaintops. Wherever he goes, a blizzard and a lightning storm follow. Usually it's just a lightning storm, but if he's somewhere cold, it'll be a blizzard. So he constantly has a storm following him. Lightning strikes happen all around him during battles and hit his opponents and then empower his hammer for a big swing. He is large enough to look over the walls of Prague, and then he slammed through them and just broke the walls open to let the Chaos Hordes through. He was not defeated in the main Chaos invasion he took place in. It was the first one with Azavar Kul. He was frozen in a glacier by the High Elves to keep him in place, and then when a mage broke him out, he killed the mage for impetus. Impudence? Impudence. That one. Not impetus. Anyway, he killed that mage just because he didn't like him, and then decided to wander around with Azavar Kul for a bit, broke down the walls of Prague, and then wandered through the city, breaking things as he pleased, and then he just kind of fucked off and left, and the rest of Azavar Kul's campaign had to go without him, and eventually Azavar lost, and Kolek was nowhere to be found. So, undefeated in melee combat, did not show up for Archaon Siege as far as I saw in the End Times books. So I don't even know if Azavar Kul was better than him or something. I think Kolek just went for the sake of going. I think he just wanted to. But his sheer size and Star Crusher's power would make it very hard for anyone to duel him. And since we're just doing strength comparisons on this list, I guess I'll see if he can beat Archaon. Archaon's too small. That's the thing, is Archaon can't effectively hit Kolek that well. He'd have to get through armor that's about as thick. Like, this armor, if it's really to scale, is probably as thick as Archaon's, like, entire body. Because it has to cover something that sleeps across the mountain. And that's just too thick. I think the Slayer of Kings would have the Dwarf Gouger problem for Queek Headtaker when he was fighting Gorbat Ironclaw, where I think he could bury Slayer of Kings up to the hilt and barely touch Kolek's skin. So you wouldn't be able to get a good stab in. He can't reach anything that is up and actually, like, you know, dangerous for Kolek. So Jorger would have to take some kind of flying option, which it probably can do. So then, let's say he's flying, you can actually get near Kolek's face. He is flying in a lightning storm that Kolek can command, so I'm pretty sure he's just going to get electrocuted, and maybe he harnesses some of the lightning power into the Slayer of Kings, possibly. But I don't know if he can wield lightning like Kolek can, so Kolek would probably be able to shatter the Slayer of Kings just using lightning, like, oh, cool, you imbued your sword with lightning. It's mine now. Poof. Something like that. And especially if lightning ever struck Dorger and locked him in place for just a second as his muscles convulsed from being fucking struck by lightning, Star Crusher is coming in and it is going to one-shot Dorger and leave Archaon on the ground. Now, if Dorger doesn't fly, he's not going to be able to reach Archaon's Kolek's key bits, and I think he eventually gets hit with Star Crusher and just dies. It might be a close fight. I could see, like, some form of it where Archaon rides underneath him and, like, raises the Slayer of Kings and, like, splits him stem to stern, that kind of thing. But I think there's more situations where Kolek's bodies Archaon's ass than Archaon gets that one good run in. There was the list. I hope you liked it. Even if you disagree, I mean, I hope I formed my arguments well enough. And if you disagree, it's just kind of a for fun lore, like, power listing video. So, no harm, no foul. Share in the comments where you think I was wrong. Just don't be a dick about it.
Roar. Subscribe, yes, yes.